Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel. And we're here today for perhaps the most special video on the channel, and making it either more special or completely mistimed. There's a bizarre energy in the room right now.
Oh yeah.
Tucker barely slept, his hair
hmm
is askew.
Yeah, look at
I'm
that.
busy, things are happening, but nothing can really prevent us, ladies and gentlemen, from talking about today's topic. Star Fox 64,
Star Fox
my favorite
64.
video game of all time. Tucker finally played it. Before we
hmm
talk about it though, you know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell while you're
Or
down
else.
there, or else Star Wolf will come get you. Pigma, you'll wake up and Pigma Dengar will be at the foot of your bed if you don't do those things for us.
And he says some unsalacious things about about Fox's dad throughout the
Yeah,
game.
he
He said,
does.
and you don't want him at the foot of your bed. Let me tell you, even if you don't know who Pegman
No,
Dangar is, if you haven't played Star Fox 64 or any other Star Fox games, I don't know which other ones he's in, but you don't want him at the foot of your bed. That is not a guy you'd cross in even a light alley.
but do you want to know where we want you? In our
This
Discord. The link to
Discord.
that also top of the description. My armpits are a little bit itchy because Tucker was making me laugh and all kinds of things were happening before we started recording. But here's the fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen. Tucker has finally played my favorite game of all time, and we're here to talk about it. So, Tucker, I want you to begin us down this journey with your overall thoughts on Star Fox 64.
I had never played an on-rail shooter before this.
Okay.
I hardly played any N64 games. I've dabbled in Smash 64. I played through Mario 64. But almost everything about this game was new to me, from the era to the gameplay style to the series. I'd never played a Star Fox game before. And your reverence for it, I'm not gonna lie, is incredibly fucking obnoxious. And it was really overbearing for the longest time. And it was the reason that I was so hesitant to get into it, because I'm like, if I play this game and have rightful criticisms of it, it's going to be really tough to talk to him about it. However, I have now beaten the video game, and I think my runtime was just over 2 hours or something. I had a real tough time with some of those battles, some of those, especially the all range ones. It was really
Yeah.
hard to figure out those controls. But after beating it, I recognize a ton of the merits of it. It's a game that I do want to go back to and play again, to understand, now that I understand the controls a little better, know what to expect. And I think it's very impressive for the time. But I do think it's absolutely fucking ludicrous that it's your favorite video game of all time when we reviewed The Last of Us Part 2 last year.
Yeah, and I want to talk about all of that. I think that there are a lot of places you can very rightly and fairly criticize this game from, especially in a 2021 lens.
hmm
And it's also interesting that you're coming off of your first playthrough, which is not to invalidate
Yes.
your perspective, but instead to share mine in the sense that this wasn't initially my favorite game of all time, right? It took a
Mm.
couple runs. I immediately identified it as something I really enjoyed, but it wasn't until
Yeah.
I had played it a couple more times and really become familiar with its systems and the way that it unfolds that I really gained a deeper appreciation and love for the title because
hmm
you point out the all range missions and those and other facets of the game just they're tough to get your mind around, especially because I don't always think that the controls are there to meet you.
Yeah.
Sometimes those all range areas feel a bit too tight and you can't maneuver
hmm
quite the way you want to, right? And I think that as you play more, you start to adapt and kind of realize how to work within those limitations. But
100%. Yeah.
for people who don't want to get that far, I can totally understand why this is a weird choice for my favorite game of all time.
So one other thing that I have to say about the game is I think I have a lot more respect for it now, realizing the concept behind choosing your path by beating missions in different ways. I think that that allows for a lot of replay value in a way that I'm not used to games having replay value. And also I think it allows you to utilize the skills that you've learned and you're adapting to the controls in different circumstances. So you're not
Yeah.
just getting better at each level that you're playing, you're getting better and seeing new levels because of that, which I think is very cool. And I think that is really the reason why I'm not low on this game at all. I think it's a very good game. I have very little experience with it, clearly, as I'm just coming off of my first playthrough. And something I've noticed as we've been going back and playing older games, we played A Link to the Past last year, we played Resident Evil 4 earlier this year, I played Mario 64, is control schemes for older games can be really fucking hard to get used to, because controls are relatively um they're pretty same across the board in
Yeah.
modern games. So when you jump back a game 20 years and you're like, oh, okay, I have to readapt to the controls. Of course, I'm playing on a Wii U Virtual Console, so they had to adapt that to the Wii U gamepad from the N64 controller, and maybe it doesn't work exactly like it should, but the controls were the problem that I had, are the biggest problem that I had with the game initially. I do think there is a learning curve to them that isn't necessarily fair because they just drop you in. Is there even a training mode in the game? I don't think
Yeah.
so. There is? Like where it teaches you the controls?
Yeah, I believe you can select from the main menu.
Okay,
You
maybe
go
I
through all
just
these
missed
different
that.
rings and things of that nature.
Sure. Okay. Well, then I dropped that criticism. But a lot of the issues that I have with this game come from the game design philosophies of its era. I didn't understand a lot of the bleeps and bloops and items floating in the fucking abyss because they don't teach you those things when you just playing through the campaign. Of course, those might be in the training mode. Maybe I'm just invalidating my own point, but I did have to dig through the menu and find the manual, and I read the manual, and it helped me a little bit. But I mostly got my adaptations to this game's systems through you giving me tips, and they were very, very
Yeah.
helpful, and I very much appreciate them because it got me through some really sticky situations.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like there's a couple things at play there. I think that it is important to realize that the manual was important to gameplay in a way that it isn't now. Of course, manuals are
100%. Yeah.
basically non-existent, but back
Mhm.
then, and I still find myself actually consulting manuals for like my GameCube games when I go back to certain esoteric games and find things in there that I don't understand because yeah, you were supposed to consult that and you were supposed to learn systems through just playing the game opposed to them being tutorialized, which is more of
Yeah.
a modern thing, which is just a difference in returning to Star Fox 64 instead of playing it when it was new. So I think those are valid perspectives to bring into the experience. But I do think that because the game is short and designed for replayability, not only for high scores but for finding new routes and everything,
Mhm.
that's when I think you're supposed to really understand. Okay, this is not only what bombs do, but when I should use them. This is why I should take this route, that route, and I think that sort of discoverability is part of why the replayability in Star Fox 64 is so high.
Mhm.
And I feel that part of what attracts me to it is that while there are these systems to understand, the base Star Fox 64 experience is not especially complicated. And I feel like it has a good visual language for teaching you, okay, the big red thing with the B on it is the bomb, and then
Sure.
here's the laser upgrade, right? They keep it straightforward and they make it instead about mechanical complexity and mastery over the systems and understanding, okay, when I'm on Corneria, I know that I'm going to get attacked from here and here, and I'm going to get ready. I'm going to charge my charge shots. I'm going to barrel roll through here. I'm going to take this path, and I'm going to figure these things out. I think part of why I'm attracted to the game is because it doesn't hold your hand in that respect, and instead lays out what I feel is a pretty understandable amount of systems and mechanics that you just have to parcel out on your own, which make it a more rewarding experience, at least for the way I play.
Yeah, so I'm someone who doesn't play things for skill, doesn't play things for high score, and we've had our qualms and quarrels about
Sure.
this in the past, but it's not a gameplay philosophy in terms of why you should keep playing that connects with me. I find it to be overly simplistic. I find it to not have a ton of what I'm looking for in games, which is variety, which is story. Obviously high score based
Mhm.
games don't usually have deep stories, and this is no exception. It's not a particularly complex story. It's kind of just like anthropomorphized Star Wars, which is I can understand why you'd like. Your
And I
little
want to talk
monkey,
about it
your
later.
monkey brain sees spaceships and animals, and you're like, oh, and that's I'm sure a large part of your enjoyment of
Sure.
it. But I do think this game's short length and the fact that there is an end to it makes me more compelled to want to try to beat it in
Yeah.
different ways. When it comes to high score based stuff or skill based stuff, even like a fighting game, my disconnect from it comes from the fact that it feels like it's the exact same thing over and over again, and there's no end. So I can't
Yeah.
log it on my backlog and say, "Hey, look, I beat this. Like I finished this game.
Sure.
I've had the experience with it. I've seen what the developer laid out." But Star Fox 64 does have that. There is a final boss. There is an end, a credit sequence. There is like a little thing at the end and all this stuff. It's like, okay, they did tell a story here, and I very much appreciate that. The fact is that you can use that replayability to explore more of the game, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, and that's something I really want to highlight, and part of why I think this game is so excellent. We recently just talked about with John Cartwright actually Sin and Punishment card in the corner. It's
The
such
video's
an
doing pretty
awesome
well.
experience.
I think
Very,
almost 100 views or a
yeah,
little over.
which is
So
super
yeah.
cool. But one key difference that we kind of touched on there, but I think is more salient here, is the fact that that game is really about high scores in the
Mhm.
sense that you're going through a set path again and again and again, and
Yep.
different difficulties will give you different permutations of some bosses and such, but it's still here's the story beat, here's the gameplay, shooting gallery, ba ba
Yeah.
da ba da. In Star Fox 64, there's such a dynamic element to that system because there are so many branching paths that really do change your experience because they are completely different levels. Not only are they
Yeah.
different levels, they
Mhm.
require you to play these same levels in new ways. So for instance, there's this one stage where there's a bomb on an all-range mission base.
Yeah, I
And
let that sucker blow up, let me tell you. Or I couldn't
right.
beat everyone around it. So that those people on that planet, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, pals.
Yeah, and that's what I want to
Star
highlight
Fox's
because
team, what are they called? They're just called Star Fox?
yeah,
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about civilian lives. It's kinda,
I think that's such a great illustration of why this game succeeds for me because you can fight and let the bomb blow up, and that's going to take you one way towards Venom.
yeah.
But when Starwolf appears, if you can shoot them down fast enough, you go another way. So I think as there, it incentivizes you to gain mastery over the systems because it
Mhm.
unlocks new routes for you. There are some that are a little bit more arbitrary, which I think are frustrating. For
Sure.
instance, on Corneria, to get Corneria's alternate route, there's a bunch of these like
Arse
arches in
rocks?
the
Yeah.
water.
Mhm.
If you go through all of those, you unlock the secret path, which does kind of incentivize you to get a better handling over R-wing movement. But I don't think that's quite as organic as fighting
Yeah.
down
Mhm.
Star Wolf or letting the bomb explode, right? But I
That
think that
specific sequence with the bomb exploding is
yeah,
is something that when I got to it and when I moved on from it, I realized, okay, this game does have something a little more to it. I honestly thought bomb's gonna explode. I'm gonna have to replay this whole fucking 15-minute level, and it's
right,
gonna be frustrating. I'm gonna have to hear the same dialogue again. Oh my god. But when it blew up and they were just like, oh shit, that sucks, and they moved on, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, right? You
yeah.
don't have to do this exact objective to move on. And honestly, it's probably a good thing that I didn't end up beating them because I think the other pathway is harder,
Yeah.
which means that that level probably would have frustrated me as well. But and especially in that level, one of those all range missions, it was one of the ones where I had a really hard time getting my head around the controls. Um, but I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to move on, even though I didn't complete the exact objective. And it's that freedom that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, there's such a degree of flexibility here, and I think it's the flexibility combined with the raw mechanics that really draw me to it. And I want to hit on that for a second. I know that's
Sure.
not really what you look for in your games, but for me, I think that once you understand the R-Wing's controls and you get behind them, there is such a precision to everything you do, and I think that there's a great satisfaction in the gameplay loop of identifying places to use charge shots and lining them up and
Hmm.
somersaulting into power-ups and figuring out the best way to optimize your route and to shoot down the enemies on your wingmates' tails and everything, and figure out, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this stage. And every time you play it, you see yourself improve because the game responds the way you want it to, right? I think there's a
Sure.
a good balance between solid mechanics, that flexibility, but also enough predictability that you can feel like, okay, I'm now every time I play Corneria, I get better and better and better at it, and my score gets higher and higher and higher. And for me, I like that, and it feels rewarding because it's matched with these other elements that we've been discussing.
Quick question about that and the high score chasing. Does the score have anything to do? Does it have any impact on what levels you go to, stuff like that? Is score a part of that, or is it just level objectives?
So I believe because I've never beaten the whole game because I'm even not good at it enough yet to do that
To
to get high
see all the
scores on
levels?
everything. No, I've seen all the levels in the game, but if you get high enough scores, you get medals, and then medals are then used to unlock, I think, other multiplayer modes. I forget exactly what it is.
Hmm.
I should have looked it up. But there's rewards for getting X number of score gives you, the little medal and everything.
Okay,
So
okay. So it's not
that
just purely high score. There are rewards behind it, but they're
yeah,
not associated with seeing different routes.
no.
Okay, all right.
No, the routes are all about getting the bomb, not getting the bomb, getting Star Wolf and all these things, finding
Mhm.
out the little intricacies of that, which I think is super, super cool.
Yeah.
I will say that not all of the routes personally are as fun as the others. For instance, sometimes you're in a submarine, which does not control very
Mhm.
well, and especially on N64 really tanks the frame rate, right?
Sure.
Sometimes the landmaster levels I think are a little bit hit or miss too. It depends, but I think that unlike the other Star Fox games, there is such a focus here. When you play Star Fox Assault and you go on foot, and then you're like, okay, now I'm on foot, and it's not nearly as fun as being in the R-Wing. Or
Sure.
you play Zero and you're in the gyrocopter, and you're like, this is blatantly not even Star Fox gameplay.
Mhm.
I think 64 is so focused, and that's part of what makes it so attractive to me.
Yeah, and I don't know the name of that submarine, and as far as
Yeah,
I know from the videos I've watched, it's only one level. There's only one submarine
yeah,
level.
there's just one.
I think that's a good way for them to introduce variety in there, but I would say 75% of the players are not going to see that level
Right.
anyway. So it doesn't actually like there's not a section where everyone knows, okay, this part sucks, right? You're not forced to go through it to beat the game. And we've experienced this with a few of the other games that were played last year. We played Super Mario World, and a couple of those levels, were kind of frustrating. You got stuck in that little forest loop. You had to beat it to get through. But I think the
Right.
idea of them trying that new thing, and even if it doesn't work exactly right, but giving the option not to do it is a good way to balance that out. Of course,
Yeah.
it would be better if that level was great, but just because it's not and that it's not required, I think makes it a little more understandable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm double checking right now because I'm freaking myself out about the medals.
Mhm.
I don't think the medals actually unlock anything.
Hmm.
I think I was completely wrong about
Okay,
that.
so it's just a high score based thing.
Yeah, in each area, all three mates must be alive at the end of the mission. Yeah. Okay. Oh no! I was right. If all medals are collected, the player unlocks expert mode.
That's a
Harder
multiplayer mode?
difficulty. It's a harder difficulty.
Oh,
So it's
interesting.
not
Okay.
multiplayer. I was talking on my ass for that. I was completely wrong about that. But
Regardless, your sentiment was true.
regardless, my sentiment is true that I want to get good enough at Star Fox 64 to get all those medals and do everything. I'm not quite there yet, which is why I still find this game so attractive to go back to.
Mhm.
Because I don't want to expose you, Tucker, but when you were having trouble with the back half of the game, so I hopped on voice chat with you and we played it together. And in the time it took you to beat the second half, I ran through the whole game again because I've beaten it 10 or 12 times, right?
Mhm.
And it's fun for me to still get better at the game and beat it faster and see levels that I don't usually see and everything, but still have that medal system to chase, right? There's still more
Sure.
for me to even do still. And I think that's a testament to the way that the replayability does feel organic beyond just getting high scores, right? There's more to see, there's more to do, and that I think affords it a certain allure that I don't know if other games of the genre quite have. For me personally, and I think definitely for a player like you.
Mhm. So the one thing that I do have to say about this game is its simplicity is both charming, but I feel a little bit underwhelming in some circumstances. I don't think any of the Star Fox characters are that endearing. I think they're one dimensional and flat, and the times that they try to introduce a little bit of backstory or deeper character elements just feel out of place. So I can't say that I'm engaged in the Star Fox world in any particular way, especially from what I know is that they don't really expand the universe that much. Like this is a remake of the first one, and like two doesn't even really count because it never came out. Like there's all sorts of things that I don't know if I want to see more of this world because they
Yeah.
just gave it to me in yeah, this is just hey, these are characters, you're gonna play as them. Don't really worry about it. Um and I can see the draw of simplicity if you're playing it for just that high score based mechanical gameplay.
Hmm.
But for me, adding those characters and not giving them more, not making there be like significant cutscenes, you don't really feel the impact of Andros because he's not even like in the game till the very end. There's like references to him. I just feel
Yeah.
like it's not enough to make it
Okay.
feel like that epic space quest that it wants to be, and that I think you maybe see it as, or some fans see it as, but I just don't think it's there, and I find that a little bit underwhelming because on the whole, this is a high production value game. It looks
Right.
great for the N64. It's got all the concepts behind it. It's got the exploration of the universe, but the story and characters are really one dimensional, and they're just fucking Star Wars ripoffs.
So I think this is where we're going to disagree the biggest because I personally I see it completely differently. And
Mhm.
if you do want that more story focused Star Fox game, you have it in things like Assault and adventures, and especially Command, which has a bunch of different endings and new characters and such. Um, but why Star Fox 64 story is more attractive to me than the more narrative heavy titles is because I think it understands what Star Fox 64 is first and foremost, which is a gameplay experience. So
Mhm.
for me, what I like about the narrative here is that it's context and it's background information, and it's about storytelling that isn't necessarily overt. I think a lot of the fun is flying through these locations and seeing, okay, Corneria is this big city, this is where people live, but okay, here's what's happening on this planet and that planet. I think that there's a lot of more environmental storytelling at play, and I think that
Hmm.
the little things such as seeing how your squad mates react when there's enemies behind them is fun. The little lines of dialogue you mentioned earlier about Pigma taunting Fox about his dad being killed. I what I like about it is, again, like the different routes and everything, there's layers to peel back. At the very top level, yeah, it's very Star Fox inspired. You basically do the trench run to get to Andros, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of very familiar notes here, which again is very appealing to me as someone who literally just has a Millennium Falcon sitting behind me every
Mhm.
time we record a video, right? But I think that there is a charm and a camp to the way that those things are represented before you even get to the deeper levels and the more contextual storytelling. I think there's something fun about the puppet mouse that talk and their dialogue. And yes, it is repetitive, but that's partially a limitation of the hardware. And I think that the character designs are fun and they are one note, but ultimately, again, a heavier narrative focus pulls away from Star Fox's success, which is about player driven gameplay and about understanding the routes and everything. So for me, I think that the story fits well in the context of this game. And if you want the story to be foregrounded, there are other Star Fox titles and Star Fox comics and such that do
Hmm.
flesh it out in the forefront instead of the background like this.
Sure. Yeah. And honestly, me playing through this my first time and knowing nothing about the Star Fox universe other than the characters are in Smash, and I'm vaguely aware of the supporting cast of characters.
Yeah,
It's honestly it would be impossible for me to catch the things about environmental storytelling on that first playthrough. It's interesting that there are those elements that you can dig into, though. I think character cutscenes between levels. I think a little bit greater introductory cutscene. I think maybe
sure,
something at the end that are all entirely skippable that don't take away
sure.
from that player focused gameplay because they are skippable would go a long way in making this feel more realized. Because for me, it's not that that stuff isn't there, but that it is so backgrounded that there's not really any reason for me to want to go after it.
Yeah,
Right? The teases are there, but barely. And if the teases were a little stronger, if there was something more clear to grab onto, then I would feel like, okay, this is a universe that I want to explore further. Unfortunately, they do. Well, unfortunately for me, and not unfortunately for you, but it's all perspective. Who, but they do background that stuff so heavily for the
yeah,
gameplay that it's if it works for what you look for in video games, and it's an older game, whatever, but I do think that's a solid criticism of the game
sure.
because I feel like they're always going for that epic space opera, but it is and as you admitted, one note in a lot of and derivative in a lot of in a lot of ways.
I think the other thing I would note is I think that another dimension to the story and the presentation and that space opera feel is how large scale these levels feel and how dynamic just the set pieces are.
Sure.
You know, you go into the sector X's and sector Y's and Z's, and you're seeing these big space battles. You're down on Corneria and you're flying through the cityscapes and everything. And you
Hmm.
get to Venom, and there's just waves of his monsters flying at you and everything, right? I think that part of that success and evoking that scope and scale is the soundtrack. It's
Sure.
the way that these levels are laid out and everything. And again, I see your point about maybe wanting a little bit more than the cutscene at the beginning, the little story crawl, then Pepper wah, 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 and then Fox going up, 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 and then the
Yeah.
mission starts. I totally see that, but I do think that there is also something to be said for just the attention to detail in the way that these stages are put together and what they evoke within the player and what how they motivate the experience, in addition to there being, hey Fox, this is what's happening and this planet has this and this and that and this
Sure.
character has that motivation, everything, right? So I think it's just a different approach to storytelling that probably doesn't hold up as well today when our expectations have been changed so much.
Yeah. So my criticism about the scope and the space opera esque whatever thing is not a criticism at all about the production design, production level of
Yeah.
the levels themselves. They're incredibly diverse. Even within levels, there's tons of different things coming at you. You're never sort of in the same area twice. There's even little almost quick time event-esque things, like you have to boost to go through the two
Sure.
asteroids, stuff like that. And I think on that level, you're right. It's there. There's these space battles in the background. It's very impressive for what they were able to squeeze out of the hardware. I think my issue with that is that that is so cool and there is so much cool stuff. I'm like, okay, but why are we fighting Andros? Like, why should we care other than that opening
Yeah, sure.
crawl? He doesn't feel like a threat particularly. These enemies don't really feel, except for Star Wolf, which I know are sort of their own thing, don't really feel fleshed out. There's not really context for this other than space battle, right?
Sure.
And that is just feels like an imbalance to me because I see these amazingly designed levels with huge scope, but then it's just blah 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 to explain
Yeah.
it. I'm like, well, that feels imbalanced. But again, I'm not demeaning this game on the whole. I
Sure.
really enjoyed it, and I think we're going a little long on the tooth in this discussion. But I think there's one more thing I want to know about. I want to end this on. I want us to tell you. I want you to tell us your story of how you first came to Star Fox 64 and how it became your favorite game of all time.
Oh, I think this is really awesome, and my answer is really weird. The first time I played Star Fox 64 was in the Masterpiece mode of Super Smash Bros. Brawl.
Hmm. Okay.
And there you had, I think, like 5 minutes of the game, and you could just play Corneria, and that was it.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I just played
Because
Corneria a
Carnier is
bunch.
longer than 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. Or
Is
you
it?
can beat
No.
it in 5 minutes.
I don't exactly remember. I mean, this was like 2008, right? Is that when Brawl
Sure.
came
Yeah.
out?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a long time ago, but I remember it was a short demo. You could get at least part of Corneria done. That's what I can remember.
Mhm.
So I played that a bunch, and then I don't think I got the Wii Virtual Console release of it. If I remember, the next time I played Star Fox 64 was because my grandparents got me a 3DS for Christmas in holiday 2011, and I believe it was August 2011 when Star Fox 64 had come out. And for Christmas
3D.
that year, yes, Star Fox 64 3D. So I got Star
Mhm.
Fox 64 3D as part of my Christmas gift, and I played it a ton there, and I really enjoyed it. And it's a 3DS version I've played far more,
Yeah.
but nowadays I prefer to play it on cart because I like playing it up on the TV. I like that
Yeah.
scope,
Hmm.
and I think it does. In some ways, it feels better to me on an N64 controller. There are certain things like the somersault and U-turn maneuvers that are easier on 3DS to pull off.
Sure.
Um, but for me, I love having Star Fox 64 up on my TV so I can enjoy the characterization for my taste in storytelling and enjoy honing my mechanical prowess in the game and finding new routes and replaying levels and seeing levels I don't always see on each run and still honing my skills so I can one day get all the medals. I really would like to. And playing it this year so quickly, beating it in like 45 minutes with no deaths and high 700 hits, it makes me really motivated to not only enjoy running through it, but now wanting to completely 100% it.
Sure.
There really is, it's a front to back affirmation of what I love about Nintendo and video games. It's storytelling that services gameplay instead of the other way around. It's inventive character designs that are endearing without being overbearing. It's gameplay mechanics that allow you to build yourself up and get better in the context of a game that rewards that. It's
Sure.
about replayability and ambiance and always being able to return to this world and these characters and gain something a little bit new every time. I see why this game and this format doesn't work today. I totally get it. I think
Hmm.
something like New Pokemon Snap is an affirmation of that, and my tastes are in the minority. And I don't think, as much as I think that there is space for it, we will ever see Star Fox return the way I want it to.
Sure. Yeah.
But
More than
that
likely.
said, more than likely. But that said, I think that what's here is so special, and if people give it a chance on Virtual Console and play it once and get a feel for it, put it down, and then come back to it, as I hope you might sometime down the road,
Yeah.
and play it, and maybe your thoughts will change. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll be the same. And that's totally fine. But I just think that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out. And for me, there's still more to put in, so I can get all those medals and get expert mode and do all these things and complete the game fully because I just really love it.
Is that and I don't know how the battery or save system or whatever on
Yeah.
Star Fox 64 works for the actual cartridge, but if you unlock that, if you get all the medals, is that permanently unlocked in your cartridge and you can like go and screw around
Yeah.
with it whenever you want? Okay,
Yeah, it
well,
should. One other thing I want to note, Tucker,
Okay, all right.
because we didn't talk about it, and it's important to talk about, is multiplayer in Star Fox
Mhm.
64 is really fun. So I have only ever played it on 3DS because that's a little bit more accessible, because you can play it through download play and everything.
Okay.
Um, but I just want to shout it out really quickly. It's a really fun dogfighting mode, some fun stages, and I've had a lot of fun with family and friends just shooting the shit out of each other over and over. And it's really additive to the main experience, but it's
Yeah.
just another dimension to the gameplay for people who want it. Just wanted to shout it out.
Well, yeah, no, I'm very glad that they have that in there. It
Yeah.
does give the game a little more expansiveness. I'm not using my words. I'm running on very little sleep right now. I'm trying my best to stay focused here. But I'm glad that there are other modes, and I would like to go and explore those even just a little bit so I can understand the scope
Sure.
of this game fully. Because as I've said, I've only played one route one time. So the fact that there is more, and not only in the campaign, but in side modes, I think is great thing. I'm never going to complain about there being a multiplayer mode. Now I can't firsthand experience testify to the quality of it, but you've played it, and I'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on if it works well on the N64. I don't know if you have anyone in your state that would care to play the
Yeah.
N64 multiplayer of Star Fox 64, but I'm glad it's there. So thank you for at least bringing it up.
Much obliged. I don't have a hat on right now.
Oh, I've
Are we
got my
done?
headphones.
Yeah, you can give me a little milady with your headphones. It's very good.
I do believe we are.
I think we're done.
I felt like you had something else to say. Look at these fucking circles in my eyes.
You're very tired. Thanks for
I
watching, everybody.